Hello and welcome to another Biotefo live show. I'm really excited because I have got with me one of my ELT rock stars, Mark Hancock. Mark, thank you very much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
So you are a teacher trainer and author, and we know you from your passion in pronunciation.
Right.
So how did your ELT journey begin?
Well, the pronunciation part started in Brazil. When I was working at the Cultura Inglesa in Rio, and they asked me to create some materials in some admin hours we had that would make pronunciation a bit more engaging and fun. And I didn't really have any idea about pronunciation at that time. I didn't have any particular interest in it. But in the process of actually making the materials, I grew to be interested in it. And I think that's often the way with a passion. It's something that it comes from work, isn't it? It's the fruit of investment. When you invest time in something and effort, then you become interested. Passion doesn't just come out of the sky like a thunderbolt. You create it yourself.
Absolutely. And what have been the challenges along the way in the pronunciation journey?
In pronunciation, I don't know if you can notice my accent, but it isn't exactly RP. I'm from Manchester. I don't have a strong Manchester accent, but I don't have all the right vowels. In particular, there's one that's represented by a symbol like an upside down V. And when I was doing my training, I was told that it was wrong, and I just couldn't get it right. I kept on trying, and now, in retrospect, I realised that it was a whole waste of time because there is no right. Some people say it this way, some people say it the other. In the end, does it work or does it not work? You don't have to necessarily sound exactly like a specific accent. That's not the point.
Because nowadays we have got the world's Englishes as well, don't we?
And we did in those days too, to be honest. It's just that we didn't know it. I think that insight became more widespread with the work of Jennifer Jenkins in the year 2000. A book came out, and then the term ELF, English as a lingua franca, became more well known. So it was always the case before that, but that's when it became, people understood, all right, why are we teaching RP or General American as if they were single things and everybody had to speak the same way? Why were we doing that? It was so obvious in retrospect. It was like, duh. Why were we doing that? Why were we punishing ourselves and everybody else with this false model?
Absolutely. Now you have written books and you post online and on your website as well, a lot of pronunciation activities. What inspires you to create these activities and get those ideas?
Well, I've always liked creating things. So, even before I was into pronunciation, I liked making puzzles and games and designing things like that. And so it came naturally to me to want to bring that together with the pronunciation. And that was a great challenge because a lot of people find pronunciation daunting. The books are often rather technical looking, and you go, ooh, what's that? How could you make that sort of accessible? That was the challenge, and the challenge is what drove me. Really, it's people say it's impossible to make that interesting. All right, I'm going to try. I'm going to make that interesting.
I'm really happy that you've mentioned the word daunting because as a non-native speaker myself in the ELT community and as a teacher myself, it sometimes can be really daunting to teach pronunciation because of all the ideas that exist or because of the preparation that it takes for us to understand the different sounds. So what advice can you give to all of as non-native speakers out there to start getting involved with pronunciation teaching?
Now, you have to understand that English is the property of all of the people who speak it, not just a few from England, for example. It belongs to everybody. Because if it's a global means of communication between us all, why would your version of English be inferior to mine? It's not. Your version of English is equally valid. If you're an intelligible speaker of English, your accent is perfectly fine as a model. This needs to be understood. Teachers need to know that. Often teachers do know that, but their bosses and clients don't. That's a problem, because people get, well, you're not a native speaker, we don't want you teaching us. That's a problem too. Everybody involved in the business of education needs to be aware of this, but it's not the case that there's any one version of English which is better or more intelligible, intrinsically more intelligible. It's not true. It just needs to be understood by everybody involved, by the teachers themselves, so that they don't start flagellating themselves. Oh, my accent is wrong. I don't sound like the Queen. Teachers need to stop feeling that their accent is inferior. It's not inferior. And everybody else involved, clients, schools shouldn't be putting up notices saying native speakers wanted, as if that were something better. It's not something better. So it's difficult for me to suggest a way for non-native teachers to get into pronunciation teaching directly, because I could tell you this and you could agree, but then you've got your boss to think about. So it's a little bit more complicated, but we've got to start somewhere.
Absolutely.
And let's get the word out, make it become commonly accepted that English is the property of all of its speakers, whoever they are, native or non-native, doesn't matter.
Lovely. Now, what is the first step for any teacher who wants to get involved with pronunciation then? So what could be our first step into pronunciation teaching?
Well, you don't need to begin with the misconception that it's a chart of symbols, for example. A lot of teachers seem to have the idea that teaching pronunciation is pointing at symbols on the chart. That's quite common, and you don't necessarily have to use symbols. That's not teaching pronunciation. Teaching symbols is teaching symbols. Teaching pronunciation is helping people to be more intelligible, to be more intelligible. That's what it's not about symbols. So a good way to start is to look at your students. If your students are all from the same language background, then find out the difficulties, the specific difficulties that they have from their language background, and focus your teaching, your pronunciation teaching, on those difficulties rather than trying to teach everything comprehensively. Focus on what's needed. So, for example, if your first language were Spanish, then you might want to have a focus on the difference between b and v in part of a lesson. That would be a suitable focus. It's something small, concrete. You can understand it. They can understand it. It doesn't have to be something massive and difficult to comprehend. Choose a small, bite-sized, useful bits to present. And when students realize, can see how useful it is, then it's not so alienating for them. They go, oh yes, I see the purpose of this. The purpose is to be more intelligible. The purpose is not to sound like any specific role model.
Absolutely. And I really like the fact that you use the word useful. I think this is important for us to understand as well. So you are presenting at the conference. What is your presentation about?
Well, it was this morning, so that's done.
Very good.
And I was focusing on the interaction between pronunciation and listening. And in particular, there are aspects of pronunciation which aren't really important. They're not really important for your students to produce, but they're very important for them to be able to understand. The features which are called connected speech, for example, in particular, the features of connected speech like weak forms, linking, elision, those features, students can be perfectly intelligible without using them. They don't need to use all of those forms in their own speech. If we agree that it's about intelligibility. But although you can choose how you speak, you can't choose how other people are going to speak to you. You need to be empowered to understand other people's use of connected speech. So you need to teach connected speech not so that your students are able to say it that way, but so that they can hear it. But I also wanted to make the point that despite that it's receptive in purpose, you might do productive activities towards that end, because it's much more powerful as a learning thing when students hear themselves speaking and it feeds back into their own ear, so that they get a mental connection between the muscular action and how it sounds. It's much more powerful as a learning moment when you do it that way, even if the objective is receptive.
Absolutely. Now, every time I see you at Biotefo, I cannot help but notice your T-shirt. So I always notice that you have got very interesting T-shirts. Can you tell us a few things more about this one?
Well, this T-shirt, and I'll show you. This T-shirt, a few years ago, when I was making my set of books called Prom Pack, I wanted to revisit this chart. I mean, it's not anything wrong with the chart. The most famous chart, I suppose, is Adrian Underhill's chart, and it's great, it's fine. But there were certain things that I wanted to modify about it, in particular in the vowel area. I felt the chart was perhaps a little bit, it drove you towards a certain specific accent a little bit too much. I wanted to create a chart which was kind of flexible in a way. So I don't want to go into too much detail because it could last quite too long for this interview, but that was the principle behind the chart. It's formed as you can see, as a system of hexagons in two concentric circles. So you've got one kind of vowel on the inner circle and another kind on the outer circle. And the position on the circle has to do with the shape of the mouth when you're making the vowel. So I won't say any more about it, but that was the idea of the T-shirt.
That was wonderful. So if anyone watching from home wants to know more about it, how can they do that?
Well, I've got two websites. There's prompack.com, which is prompack.com. That's the one that is connected to the books I was just talking about. And it also has all of these charts as downloads there.
And some really useful dice to use in class.
And some dice. And the other one is called Hancock McDonald. There's no A in the McDonald. Like in McDonald's, the hamburger thing. HancockMcDonald.com. And that one is more just general free downloadable resources for teachers, including quite a lot on pronunciation, but other topics as well. So that's more general. Prompack is more specific.
Lovely.
There's that. And there's a YouTube channel for the Prompack as well. So if you just type Prompack into YouTube, you should find channels with videos connected to this material.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. While being at Biotefo, have you had the chance to enjoy the conference? And
I have.
yes?
Yes.
How has it been for you?
Well, intense. It's intense. It's like going into a tunnel. When you come out at the end of an Biotefo, it's like, whew, what was that? And especially after such a quiet period when everybody's been at home because of the pandemic. It's my first excursion into the outside world since then. So it's all doubly intense because I'm just not used to it.
Can imagine,
Yeah.
of course.
And I miss my siestas.
We do too. Now, before we go, I have got not a question, but a challenge for you. Can you describe Biotefo in 3 words?
You see, I've already started, haven't I? I just said
Yes.
intense. Intense is the first one, right? Now, that's a challenge. Let's see. It's social, especially now that we're back in person. The virtual version last year, it was good, but I don't think the platform could replicate the what's the word? Linking, what do you call it? Networking aspect of it. You just can't really do that, I don't think. Yet. Yet.
Yes.
Maybe soon. You want a third one?
Yes, please.
It has to be positive, I take it. Because I would say tiring. I mean, to be honest, it leaves you exhausted in a good way.
Yes, absolutely.
Let me put a positive spin on that.
I remember in my first Biotefo, I went to so many sessions that at some point I found a very, very quiet spot. And then I was like, oof, that was intense, as you mentioned. And I keep seeing people around who need this quiet time because it's so overwhelming in a very positive aspect and tiring in a very positive aspect. And this is wonderful. It's a good kind of exhaustion, isn't it?
Yes.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Mark, thank you very much for joining us today. And I hope you enjoy the rest of Biotefo. Thank you very much.
Thank you for this conversation.
Thank you.
A pleasure.
Thank you. And thank you very much for joining us from home. We hope to see you again soon.